My daughter's fiancé looked me dead in the eye and said with contempt, "There's no place for beggars like you at our wedding." And the most painful part? My daughter silently agreed with him, choosing money over her own family. But when my Rolls Royce pulled up later, and he discovered I wasn't poor at all, but worth 18 million, their reaction was unforgettable. You won't believe what happened next. Frankly, old man, you just don't belong at our wedding. Victor sneered. This will be an elite event. People like you would only ruin the atmosphere. The crystal chandelier above our table seemed to dim as his words sank in. My hands trembled against the white tablecloth, and suddenly I felt every eye in the oakwood grill fixed on us. Wealthy diners leaned closer, their hushed whispers buzzing with curiosity. Victor, dressed in his $3,100 suit, rested one arm around my daughter's shoulders. His gold watch sparkled under the light as he gestured dismissively toward my worn button-down shirt and khakis. I had driven nearly 2 hours through Manhattan traffic just to meet the man Loretta claimed to love. Dad. Loretta's voice was faint, almost ashamed. She wore a dress I had never seen before. Designer, expensive, turning her into someone I barely recognized. Her polished fingers fidgeted nervously with the massive diamond on her hand. Maybe Victor has a point. Her words cut deeper than his insults. This will be a very refined celebration, she continued, without meeting my eyes. The guest list is mostly Victor's colleagues and their families, people from a certain class. I stared at my daughter, the little girl who once defended me when others mocked our old car, the girl who used to proudly call me the smartest dad in the world. Now, she couldn't even look at me, agreeing that I wasn't good enough for her wedding. Victor snapped his fingers at a passing waiter. Another bottle of Dom Rayol, he demanded, smirking as if he'd already won. You understand, don't you? This isn't personal. It's just business. Image matters in my world. The waiter hurried away, grateful to escape the tension. Even the restaurant staff avoided our table now, their smiles thin and strained. Daddy, please don't make this harder than it already is, Loretta whispered at last. Her eyes met mine, but they carried no warmth, only embarrassment. Embarrassment of me. The floor seemed to vanish beneath my chair. My ears rang as the reality set in. My own daughter, the child I had raised alone after Mary died, the little girl I worked double shifts to clothe and feed, was choosing this arrogant man over me. I understand, I said quietly, forcing my voice to stay steady despite the storm inside. I wish you both happiness. Carefully, I folded my napkin, set it beside my untouched wineglass, and stood. My movements felt mechanical, detached. Behind me, other diners no longer pretended to eat. They watched like it was theater. As I reached the exit, Victor's voice carried across the restaurant. See? Sometimes you just have to be direct with people like that. The doorman held the glass door open, his expression unreadable. Behind me, I heard Loretta's nervous, artificial laugh, the kind that sounded nothing like the pure joy she once had as a child. The cool spring air hit me outside, but it couldn't ease the burning shame in my chest. My hands shook so badly, I struggled to fit the key into my old pickup truck's ignition. Through the window, I saw Victor and Loretta return to their meal, relaxed and smiling now, as if they'd finally solved an inconvenient problem. My daughter raised her glass with a polished smile, and he nodded in approval. At last, the engine rumbled to life. I pulled out into the Manhattan streets, the city's wealth mocking me from every direction. Sleek Ferraris, Mercedes, and BMWs zoomed past, their drivers probably wondering why such an old relic was even allowed on their roads. Without thinking, muscle memory carried me toward I 95 North. The radio played some classical piece I didn't recognize, but I couldn't focus on the music. Victor's voice echoed in my head. Beggars like you, people like that. But worse than his cruelty was the realization creeping in. This hadn't been spontaneous. He had planned my humiliation. Maybe he had even coached Loretta on what to say. The Bronx gave way to Westchester County, familiar exit signs flashing by. Normally, this drive comforted me, a way to leave Manhattan's chaos behind and slip into Connecticut's calm suburbs. But tonight, each mile felt like I was driving deeper into isolation. At a rest stop near White Plains, my hands trembled so badly I had to pull over. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, the smell of gasoline and stale coffee filled the air. A few truckers shuffled between pumps, their conversations a low murmur in the night. I reached into my wallet and pulled out a photo I'd carried for 16 years. Mary and me at Loretta's college graduation. We looked so proud, so hopeful. Mary's arm wrapped around our daughter, Loretta's diploma clutched in her hands as she grinned at the camera. Mary, what did I do wrong? I whispered to the creased photo. Where did we lose her? A memory struck me. Loretta at 8 years old, crying because kids at school called our car ugly. I had worked 3 extra shifts that month just to buy her new clothes, determined she'd never feel ashamed again. And Mary, always steady, kneeling beside her bed, reminding her, family stands together, sweetheart. Money comes and goes, but family is forever. But tonight, Loretta had chosen money. She had looked at Victor's wealth and decided it was worth more than 30 years of her father's love. The little girl who once defended me had grown into a woman embarrassed of where she came from. Another memory surfaced. Last Christmas, Loretta had visited for only 2 hours before rushing back to the city, distracted, checking her phone, making excuses about important people she had to see. I thought it was just youth, her building her own life. But now I realized she'd been pulling away for months, maybe years, ashamed of my modest home, my old truck, my simple clothes. Victor hadn't corrupted her. He had simply given her permission to say what she already felt. Back on the highway, near Stamford, something shifted inside me. The shock was solidifying into something colder, sharper. I had given 30 years of my life to that child, 30 years of sacrifice, of putting her needs first. And with one insult, she had discarded it all. The pain was still there, burning, deep, but alongside it grew something else, a quiet, focused anger. If Loretta wanted to measure worth by money, then perhaps it was time she learned just how much money was at stake. I didn't sleep that night. By dawn, I was still pacing my kitchen, the coffee maker groaning through its third pot. The house felt emptier than ever. Family photos lined the mantel above the fireplace. Mary and me on our wedding day, Loretta's first steps, her birthdays, her graduation, moments when love had mattered more than wealth. But now, she had chosen wealth, and if money was the scale she wanted to use, then I would show her what real wealth looked like. I walked down the wooden steps to my basement, each one creaking beneath my weight. The early sun slanted through the small windows, catching dust motes in the air. Most of the basement was my workshop, tools hanging neatly on pegboards, projects half finished on the workbench. But behind the bench, hidden under an old tarp, sat the safe. I had bought it in 1996, the same year I made my first real investment. My fingers dialed the combination without hesitation. Mary's birthday, then Loretta's. With a soft click, the heavy door swung open. Inside, organized in a neat manila folders, lay my true secret: stock certificates, investment documents, bank statements, the paper trail of decisions people once mocked me for, but which had paid off in ways none of them could imagine. The first folder was Apple. I slid out the certificate, dated September 16th, 1996, 1,100 shares at $50 each. My entire life savings at the time. My colleagues had laughed, calling it reckless. My boss said, "You could have bought a nice car with that money." Instead, I bought Apple stock 3 months before Steve Jobs returned. The next folder was Tesla, thicker than the first. Another gamble in 2003, when Elon Musk was just another Silicon Valley dreamer with an impossible idea about electric cars. I had put in another $50,000 when Tesla was barely more than a plan. I powered up my old laptop, the screen flickering to life. My heart pounded as I refreshed the stock prices. The numbers glowed on the screen, almost surreal. Apple, 247th. Apple, $247 per share. Tesla, $180 per share. With stock splits and dividend reinvestments over the years, those simple bets had multiplied beyond anything I could have imagined. The numbers were staggering. My Apple investment alone was now worth $12 million. Tesla had grown into $4 million. Add in the other tech companies I'd quietly invested in, and the total came to $18 million. $17 million sitting in my basement, while my daughter had called me a beggar. I pulled out another folder, one that hurt to even touch, draft documents prepared 3 months earlier by my attorney, Loretta's wedding gift, a trust fund worth $10 million, designed to provide for her future, to encourage education and charitable giving. I had planned to reveal it in my wedding speech, a surprise that would secure her future forever. The irony was cruel. She had humiliated me for being poor, while unknowingly sitting across from a man worth more than everyone else in that restaurant combined. She had chosen Victor's shallow, flashy wealth over her father's quiet abundance. I reached for my phone and dialed Leo Thompson, my broker of 15 years. Maxwell? His voice was surprised. "You never call during business hours. Everything all right?" "Everything's fine, Leo. I need to make some changes to my will. Specifically, Loretta's inheritance." There was a pause. "Changes? What happened?" "Let's just say circumstances have changed," I said evenly. "I want to restructure the trust fund." As we discussed the details, a strange satisfaction grew inside me. Victor wanted to measure worth by money. Fine. I could play that game too, but unlike Victor, I had the means to play it on a scale he couldn't begin to comprehend. When I finished, I carefully placed the documents back into the safe and spun the lock shut. As I climbed the stairs, I realized I was smiling, not warmly, but with a cold, deliberate purpose. If Loretta wanted a lesson in money and power, I would be her teacher. The phone rang just as I stepped into the kitchen, its shrill tone cutting through the quiet morning. The newspaper lay unopened beside my breakfast, my eggs growing cold. Yesterday's pain had hardened into something sharper, something useful. The phone rang again. Loretta's name glowed on the caller ID. I let it ring twice before answering, my voice controlled. Hello, daughter. Good morning, Daddy. Her tone was syrupy sweet, dripping with practiced charm. How are you feeling today? Fine, I replied flatly. What do you need? There was a pause. Then the manipulation began. Well, I was hoping we could talk about the wedding. There are some details Victor and I need to finalize, and she trailed off, waiting for me to fill the silence. I didn't. The thing is, Daddy, she continued, we've run into a small financial situation. The florist wants payment up front, and the decorator needs a big deposit by Friday. Victor's money is temporarily tied up in investments. How much? I asked. 30,000. She said it casually, as though it were nothing more than gas money. I know it sounds like a lot, but all the other parents are contributing. I just thought you'd want to help make my special day perfect. The audacity left me breathless. Yesterday I was a beggar, unworthy of her wedding. Today she wanted 30,000. That's interesting, I said slowly. Yesterday I was too poor to attend. Today you're asking me for money. Daddy, that's completely different, she snapped. This is about the wedding, not social considerations. Social considerations, I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue. Just give me the money, she demanded. Why are you being so difficult? It's not like you have anything else to spend it on in that little house of yours. No, I said. What do you mean, no? I mean, no, Loretta. Ask Victor's wealthy friends. Ask his important business associates. Surely they'd be happy to help with your social considerations. You're being ridiculous, she spat. I'm your daughter. Yes, I said quietly. You are. And yesterday, you made it very clear what that means to you. The line went silent. When she finally spoke again, her voice was cold, calculated. Fine, don't help, but don't expect a relationship with me after this. Victor says, I don't need people in my life who won't support my happiness. Goodbye, Loretta. I hung up before she could respond. The kitchen fell silent again. It felt emptier, hollower. I sat at the table, staring at the phone, processing what had just happened. $30,000, more than many people earned in a year. She had requested as casually as borrowing $20 for lunch. No shame, no recognition of her cruelty the night before. In her mind, the wedding excused everything, erased every betrayal. I looked at the calendar pinned to the wall. A date was circled in red. June 15th, 3 weeks away. 3 weeks. Enough time to teach her exactly what real money looked like. The weeks slipped by slowly, filled with planning and quiet phone calls to my broker. Every detail had to be flawless for what I had in mind. Saturday afternoon found me at a small cafe in downtown Stamford. sitting at an outdoor table under the spring sunshine. I had chosen this spot deliberately. Emily often came here on weekends to grade papers and plan her lessons. My newspaper served as camouflage while I waited, a forgotten cup of coffee cooling beside me. Right on schedule, she appeared. Laptop, bag slung over her shoulder, cheerful and completely unsuspecting. Mr. Watkins, she exclaimed, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure. What a wonderful surprise. Are you here planning wedding surprises too? Perfect. She had given me the opening I needed. Emily, how lovely to see you. Please sit down. I gestured toward the empty chair across from me. Wedding surprises? She asked, as she settled in, eyes sparkling with excitement. Well, I probably shouldn't say anything, but since you're Loretta's father, I've been helping with some of the final details. June 15th is coming so fast. Indeed it is. I leaned forward with the practiced warmth of a proud father. Tell me about this venue. Oh, it's extraordinary, she gushed. The grand estate in Greenwich. Absolutely gorgeous. Victor really knows how to pick a location. 200 guests. Can you imagine? And the catering alone is costing $150 per person. I nodded politely as she spoke, hiding my tightening jaw. 200 guests. $30,000 on catering alone. Yet Loretta had begged me for money, as though they were struggling. What time does it all begin? I asked, maintaining the mask of casual interest. Ceremony at 4 in the afternoon. Cocktails in the garden after. Dinner at 7. Dancing until midnight. Oh, and valet parking, of course. Victor insisted. He said his business associates expect a certain level of service. How thoughtful of him, I said, the words bitter in my mouth. Emily didn't notice. Loretta seems so stressed about everything being perfect. She continued happily, giving away more information. Victor has very specific ideas about how everything should look. The flowers, the music, even the seating arrangements. It all has to meet his standards. I nodded sympathetically. It sounds like quite an undertaking. I'd love to do something special for them, but I want it to be a surprise. You won't mention our conversation, will you? Of course not, Emily beamed. I love surprises. What are you thinking? Oh, I'm still working on the details, I said smoothly. But knowing the timeline helps enormously. We chatted for another 20 minutes, Emily innocently supplying a complete briefing on the wedding logistics, guest arrivals, parking arrangements, even the security measures Victor had insisted upon. She was a treasure trove of information, blissfully unaware that she was helping me plan something far from the sentimental surprise she imagined. When she finally left, promising once more to keep our talk secret, I remained at the table. I pulled out my small notebook and wrote down every detail she'd given me. At the bottom of the page, I added a line, luxury car dealerships, Manhattan. It was time for the next phase of my plan. The taxi dropped me on the corner of Fifth Avenue and 57th Street, where gleaming showrooms displayed machines worth more than most homes. Rolls-Royce, Bentley, Aston Martin, vehicles for those who never had to worry about money. I dressed deliberately in my usual outfit, khakis, worn jacket, scuffed shoes. The only hint this wasn't a casual visit was the leather portfolio tucked under my arm. The showroom's marble floors glowed beneath crystal chandeliers. Well-dressed salespeople floated between customers, their sharp eyes instantly measuring each visitor's worth. When I walked in, those eyes dismissed me without hesitation. I approached the centerpiece of the display, a midnight blue Rolls-Royce Phantom, chrome gleaming under the spotlights. The placard read 547,000. A young salesman approached reluctantly. Sir, are you sure you're in the right place? I need to purchase your finest Rolls-Royce Phantom, I said calmly. He actually laughed. Sir, these vehicles start at $500,000. Perhaps I could show you something more suitable for your budget. Amused glances rippled through the showroom. Customers smirked, whispering about the old man in worn clothes who had wandered into the wrong place. I set my portfolio on the glass counter, opened it, and withdrew a certified bank check for $500,000. I placed it gently in front of him. The transformation was instant. The salesman's smirk evaporated, replaced by shock. Within seconds, a manager appeared, followed by another, each tripping over apologies. I'm so incredibly sorry, Mr. Watkins, the manager said, bowing slightly. Please, allow me to personally show you our premium models. For the next hour, I was treated like royalty. Every feature explained in detail, every option demonstrated with reverence. I chose quickly and decisively. Midnight blue exterior, cream leather interior, every technology package available. As the paperwork neared completion, the manager added, we also offer premium chauffeur services. Our best driver is Marcus Thompson, former military, impeccable record, complete discretion. Marcus arrived within minutes, tall and sharp in a perfectly pressed uniform. His handshake was firm, his voice steady. It would be an honor to work with you, Mr. Watkins. When would you require my service? June 15th, a wedding in Greenwich. The details are somewhat unconventional. I understand completely, sir. Discretion and professionalism are my specialties. As I signed the final documents, I glanced at my calendar. June 15th was circled in red. Now, just 2 weeks away, everything was falling perfectly into place. The same people who had dismissed me an hour ago now practically bowed as I left the showroom. I left, their respect bought with a single check. Soon, Loretta and Victor would learn the same lesson about assumptions and appearances. The transformation was only just beginning. 3 weeks ago, I wouldn't have dared to step foot into a place like Brooks Brothers. The Madison Avenue flagship gleamed like a temple to wealth, its polished glass, windows, displaying suits that cost more than most people's monthly salary. But today, as I stepped out of the taxi onto the busy sidewalk, I carried myself differently. The success at the Rolls-Royce dealership had changed something inside me permanently. The doorman greeted me with a respectful nod as I entered. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over displays of Italian wool and Egyptian cotton, while polished consultants glided across the showroom floor with quiet authority. Good afternoon, sir. How may I assist you today? The salesman's suit fit like a second skin, his presence an advertisement for the quality of the store itself. I need a complete transformation, I told him simply. Custom tailoring, accessories, everything. I have an important event in 3 weeks. Excellent, he replied with professional ease. Let's begin with your measurements. Then, we'll discuss the image you'd like to project. For the next 2 hours, I was immersed in an education in luxury. He spoke of thread counts, fabric weights, hidden stitching techniques, his words weaving a world most people never touched. Together, we chose a deep, charcoal gray Italian wool, so fine it felt like silk beneath my fingertips. I need to look like a millionaire, I said as we reviewed style options. You will, he replied without hesitation. This suit is power in fabric form, a classic cut, flawless construction, and a perfect fit. The moment you enter a room, no one will doubt who you are. We moved on to accessories. A Rolex Datejust, 15,000. It's steel and gold, gleaming under showroom lights. Egyptian cotton shirts, a silk tie with threads of burgundy glinting like quiet fire. Italian leather shoes, handmade in Florence, polished to a mirror shine. Every piece cost more than my old monthly budget. Together, they created something else entirely. Presence. At the preliminary fitting, the mirror reflected a man I hardly recognized. The suit altered not just my appearance, but my posture, my bearing, my very energy. I no longer saw a modest retiree from Connecticut. I saw wealth, authority, confidence. We'll have everything prepared by June 12th, the consultant promised as I signed another check. Final fitting on the 13th. You'll be perfectly ready for your event. Walking back onto Madison Avenue, I caught my reflection in a shop window. Even in my old clothes, I carried myself differently now. The set of my shoulders, the steadiness of my eyes, the quiet smile on my lips. It had all changed. June 15th was exactly 3 weeks away. Time to show them who I really was. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Marcus's number. Final arrangements had to be locked in. Timing, coordination, every detail perfected. The transformation was almost complete. June 15th dawned clear and bright, flooding my modest bedroom with golden light. I'd slept better than I had in months, waking naturally at 6 a.m. Today felt electric, heavy with destiny. Breakfast was simple: eggs, toast, black coffee in my chipped mug. But I ate with intention, knowing it might be the last breakfast of my old life. By tomorrow, everything would be different. On the kitchen table lay the wedding invitation I was never sent. Elegant script announced the union of Loretta Watkins and Victor Harrove, 4 p.m. But I had other plans for Formac. Hot water pounded over me in the shower, steady and grounding. Every detail mattered today. The precision of my shave, the parting of my hair, the quiet ritual of transformation. From my closet, I lifted the Brooks Brothers suit, still wrapped in its protective cover. Unveiling it felt ceremonial. The fabric gleamed like liquid silver, each stitch a promise. When I slipped the jacket across my shoulders, it felt sculpted to me like it had been waiting all my life. The Rolex clasped onto my wrist with satisfying weight. Italian shoes, silk tie, gold cufflinks, each element layered into an image of quiet, unshakable wealth. I stood before the mirror, staring at the final version of myself. Gone was the man who'd been humiliated 3 months ago. This was someone new, a millionaire, a force, a man who commanded attention simply by existing. From my dresser, I picked up the stack of note cards. My speech. I had rehearsed the words countless times, but today they pulsed with electricity. $17 million. That phrase alone would change everything. On the nightstand, Mary's photograph smiled at me. Her eyes, soft and kind, held the memory of everything I'd once been. I hope you understand what I have to do, I whispered to her image. They need to learn that family matters more than money. At exactly 2:30, the deep purr of the Rolls-Royce engine broke the stillness. The performance was about to begin. The low rumble of the Rolls-Royce engine announced Marcus's arrival. Through my front window, I watched neighbors peek from their modest homes, eyes fixed on the luxury car parked in my driveway. The contrast was almost comical. A $500,000 Phantom in front of a house worth less than $200,000. Marcus stood tall beside the open rear door, immaculate in his black chauffeur's uniform. Good afternoon, Mr. Watkins. You look impeccable, he greeted. Thank you, Marcus. Today will be very interesting indeed, I replied as I slipped into the cream leather interior. The door closed with a soft, confident thunk. That blend of German precision and British craftsmanship. As we pulled away from my quiet street, I caught one last glimpse of the modest little house I had called home since Mary died. By nightfall, I would no longer need to pretend to be poor. The estate rose into view like something out of a storybook. Rolling green lawns cut into perfect patterns, marble fountains sparkling in the sunlight, and white statues scattered among the gardens. The Georgian mansion itself towered above it all, 3 stories of stone and glass, its columns and terraces designed to declare wealth without restraint. Impressive venue, Marcus observed as we eased into the circular drive, where other chauffeurs dropped off their equally pampered passengers. Indeed, Victor certainly knows how to spend, I said, noting the Bentleys, Lamborghinis, and gleaming Mercedes lining the valet area. More than 200 guests drifted across the terraces and gardens, their laughter rising like champagne bubbles. Marcus positioned the Phantom directly in front of the entrance, in perfect view of the gathering. As he came around to open my doctor, I spotted Loretta and Victor at the far end of the garden, greeting arrivals with polished smiles, blissfully unaware of how different this night would end. Shall I wait here, sir? Marcus asked. Yes, this won't take long. The moment I stepped onto the stone drive, conversations faltered. Heads turned. The Phantom drew the first looks, but it was my presence that sealed their fascination. Who is that? I heard someone whisper. Look at that car. It's a Phantom. $500,000 at least. Is that Loretta's father? I thought Victor said. He wasn't. The murmurs spread like ripples in a pond. I walked with measured confidence, each step deliberate. Sunlight flashed from my Rolex, my Italian shoes clicking against the stone with authority. Loretta spotted me first. Her glass froze midway to her lips, her expression sliding from confusion to recognition to shock. She gripped Victor's arm, whispering in panic. His smile vanished as he followed her gaze, eyes narrowing as he tried to reconcile the beggar he once mocked with the man approaching now, Mr. Watkins. His voice cracked as he rushed forward, Loretta stumbling behind him. We We must have forgotten to send your invitation. How wonderful of you to come anyway. How kind of you to remember me now, I answered smoothly, plucking a champagne flute from a passing tray. A lovely venue. You certainly have taste. The guests stared, their opinions of Victor and Loretta shifting with every second. Wealth attracts wealth, and they were already drawing closer, curious about the man. In the phantom, Victor fought to maintain his composure, whispering frantically to a groomsman, while Loretta tried to smile through her shock. I checked my watch. 3:55. 5 minutes until the ceremony. Perfect. The evening unfolded with seamless elegance. Ceremony flowing into reception, champagne and chatter spilling across the terrace. Before dinner, in the ballroom, crystal chandeliers glowed above white roses and gold-trimmed tables, while a string quartet filled the room with delicate music. Guests whispered about the mysterious father who had arrived in such extravagant fashion. I positioned myself near the head table, champagne in hand, watching. Loretta kept glancing nervously at me. Victor, outwardly calm, kept whispering urgently to his groomsmen, desperate to understand how the beggar had become this man of wealth. At last, the wedding coordinator tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, before dinner, a toast from the bride's father, Mr. Maxwell Watkins. Exactly the moment I had been waiting for. I stepped forward to the stand. The room stilled. 200 faces turned my way, waiting for the traditional blessing. Loretta's shoulders eased with relief, perhaps thinking this would be a warm, fatherly speech. She was wrong. Dear guests, I began, my voice clear and steady. Thank you for joining us in celebrating my daughter's wedding. It is truly a magnificent occasion. No expense has been spared, and I commend the effort. Polite murmurs rippled through the room. Loretta smiled faintly. Victor nodded. But some of you may not know me well, I continued, pausing just long enough to hold the silence. I am Maxwell Watkins, Loretta's father, the same man some of you have called a beggar. The word dropped like stone in water. All conversation died. At the bridal table, Victor's face went pale. I hope you won't mind if I share a story, I said, slipping a folded set of documents from my jacket. A story about family and the true measure of a person's worth. Around the room, phones appeared discreetly, ready to capture what promised to be extraordinary. Loretta's glass trembled in her hand. This was no father's blessing. This was the reckoning. From my pocket, I drew the documents. This, I said evenly, is what they represent. Every eye followed the motion of my hand. The ballroom had gone so quiet, I could hear the faint clink of crystal glasses, the rustle of silk gowns, the weight of 200 people leaning forward in anticipation. Let me tell you exactly what they contain. The papers crackled softly as I unfolded them, the sound magnified by the silence. 200 faces fixed on me, rapt with attention. Phones lifted discreetly, eager to capture what everyone already sensed was history in the making. These documents, I announced, my voice cutting cleanly through the hush, represent my investment portfolio. Current value, $17 million. The reaction was instant. Gasps, sharp whispers exploding across the ballroom. 17 million? Did he say million? My God, I raised the brokerage statements high, allowing the nearest guest to see the official letterhead and figures. Apple computer stock, purchased September 1996, $50,000. Tesla, acquired in 2003, another 50,000, both worth millions today. A champagne flute slipped from Loretta's trembling hand, shattering against the marble floor. Dad, please, she whispered, but her plea drowned beneath the murmurs, spreading like wildfire. I am not, nor have I ever been, a beggar, I continued, my tone calm, deliberate. What I am is a father who was mocked and humiliated by his daughter's fiancé for nothing more than dressing modestly. Victor lurched to his feet, his face blazing with panic and rage. This is absurd. You're making a scene at our wedding. But the crowd's gaze had already shifted. The guests' attention never wavered, their phones recording every word of my revelation. Originally, I said, lifting another set of documents, I had planned a different wedding gift. $10 million in a trust fund created for Loretta's security. The number struck the room like thunder. Loretta's face went pale as the weight of my words sank in. 10 million, she whispered, barely audible. But 3 months ago, I continued, my daughter stood by her fiancé's judgment that I was too poor, too embarrassing, too much of a beggar to attend this wedding. Every head turned sharply toward Victor and Loretta. Expressions shifted from awe to judgment. I could practically see the recalculations happening. Wealthy guests reassessing everything they thought they knew about this couple. Instead, I declared, revealing the final set of papers with deliberate flourish, my entire fortune of $17 million will be donated to educational charities, scholarships for children of modest means, children some might dismiss as beggars simply because of their appearance. Gasps rippled again as I raised the signed, binding trust documents, filed yesterday with my attorney. The decision is final. Loretta staggered toward the microphone, her wedding dress swishing, her face frozen in horror. 10 million? I lost 10 million because of Victor? Her fiancé's composure cracked like glass. You insane old man, Victor shouted, his voice booming over the stunned crowd. You've ruined everything, our future, our plans. But no one was looking at me anymore. Their eyes were locked on the bride and groom, recording their public unraveling with a mixture of fascination and disdain. The justice unfolding was sharper, cleaner than I had ever imagined. I believe, I said calmly into the microphone, I've said all that needed to be said. I stepped back and began walking toward the exit. The guests parted before me, like the Red Sea, every step measured, dignified, carrying the weight of justice delivered. Behind me, chaos erupted. Loretta's sobs, Victor's furious shouting, the murmurs of guests processing the scandal they'd just witnessed. Dad, please wait. Loretta's desperate voice cracked, echoing through the ballroom. She stumbled after me, her dress dragging heavily. We can fix this. Please, let's talk. I turned slowly, meeting her tear-streaked face with calm resolve. Daughter, you made your choice 3 months ago when you sided with the man who called me a beggar. That cruelty was yours. Now this choice is mine. I was wrong, she sobbed. Please, Can't we settle this like family? The word family lingered bitterly in the air. 200 guests watched in silence, their phones immortalizing every word for the world to see. Some choices, I said softly, have permanent consequences. You chose his money over your father's love. Now you must live with it. Behind her, Victor raged on, shouting at anyone who would listen. He's insane. Don't listen to him. He's lost his mind. But the wealthy crowd edged away from him, their expressions betraying what they truly thought of a man who had thrown away $17 million out of arrogance. I overheard one elderly gentleman mutter to his wife, 17 million, and that fool threw it away by insulting the father. I resumed my walk, Loretta's broken pleas trailing me. The ballroom doors opened into the grand foyer, where Marcus stood by the Rolls Royce. Professional as always, sir, he said smoothly, holding open the rear door. I trust everything went well? Better than I could have hoped, I replied, settling into the cream leather interior. As the phantom purred to life, I glanced back one last time. Loretta stood alone on the marble steps, her expensive gown crumpled, mascara streaming down her cheeks as she watched both her father and $10 million vanish. Victor, meanwhile, was engulfed by murmuring guests, their gestures sharp, their faces lit with disdain at his downfall. The car glided down the estate's long driveway, carrying me away from the wreckage of their wedding and into whatever came next. On the terrace, guests still whispered animatedly, unable to stop replaying what they had witnessed. My phone buzzed with messages. Emily, perhaps. Maybe Loretta. Maybe even curious guests. I powered it off without reading. Justice, I reflected, as the Connecticut countryside blurred past, had never tasted so sweet. The humiliated retiree they mocked 3 months ago was gone. In his place sat a man who had proven wealth was never about money. It was about dignity, respect, and knowing your worth. And some lessons, I thought with quiet satisfaction, are worth $17 million to teach.